G'day and welcome to Reality Check Q&A with me, your host, Ross Coulthart, and to help me through always the most difficult part of the week, my friend and colleague, Megan Orada. Megan, as you can see, I'm in a hotel room on the road in Australia right now, but I hope I can be reasonably well seen okay.
Absolutely, and we will not give away your location.
In a location yet to be determined.
Love it. All right, let's get to the first question, Ross. We had so much awesome feedback from the Dr. Villarroel episode. We will go to Carlos. Dear Mr. Coulthart, congratulations for your last reality check episode. You are quite an amazing host and professional. I agree. Thank you for letting us know the research from Dr. Villarroel. I follow you here in my home country, Portugal, through the NewsNation YouTube channel. When I was watching the interview, I got a question popping up in my head that could be a game changer in this investigation, one that probably Dr. Villarroel and other astronomers might know the answer. And the question is, are there in the world, probably USA, Australia, or Europe, any archived telescope data contemporary from the same period from Dr. Villarroel's research that could also be tested for transient phenomena? That could really be breakthrough for other teams of astronomers to test different data sets, hoping you will find a way to pinpoint possible archives like this one anywhere else in the world and perhaps protecting them from being destroyed. I kindly thank you for your attention.
That is such a good question, and I wish I'd asked Beatrice that when I did the interview. I suspect there are plates, not necessarily from the exact moment, because of course where it worked for Beatrice was that at a particular point in time, on a particular day, in a period of around about 30 minutes, the object was there and gone the next. So I'd be really surprised if the objects are the same objects in that same time period on other glass plates around the world. But yes, there are glass plates. In fact, I've spoken to people here in Australia who've told me that there is an enormous collection of glass photographic plates, much of which have not yet been digitised because we can't afford the cost of digitisation. One of the reasons why Beatrice could do the project that she could do is because the Palomar survey plates were digitised and they were easily accessible. I think that's a really good idea. I'll ask Beatrice and find out whether there are other data sources that could be used, perhaps not necessarily to verify her particular transients, but whether it could be verified that at that particular point in history, someone else was recording on photographic plates the same kinds of transient objects at geosynchronous altitude. I mean, the allegations really are quite extraordinary that have been made on the data sets provided by Dr. Villarroel and her team. It implies very strongly, statistically very highly, that there is something technological, something constructed with a highly mirrored, reflective, specular surface 42,000 kilometres from Earth in geosynchronous orbit. And it was there in the 1950s before humans developed space rockets that could send objects into space. So it's a pretty cool mystery, and yes, I agree, that would be a fascinating way to try and verify it. It would also be a good example of what we call repeatability, part of the scientific method.
Okay, great. We have another question on X. If these transients were ice crystals, wouldn't it make sense that they don't show up in the shadow of the Earth? Why are they not ice?
They're not ice because of the size and also the specular nature of the objects. They're larger than an ice crystal, and an ice crystal is not a reflective, flat, mirrored surface, highly reflective surface, such as what Beatrice is saying that her team are recording with these specific dot point light sources. So apparently they've ruled out ice crystals, they've ruled out smooth-looking rocks, potential asteroids. The suggestion very strongly, and of course this is all still subject to peer review, the suggestion is that this has to be a highly mirrored reflective surface, something consistent with a shiny alien spaceship.
We can dream.
Wouldn't it be cool?
It would be great.
I mean, it does, actually, before I blather on, I will make the observation, it does raise the possibility that whatever this object is, or these objects are, they were in space in the 1950s before human occupation of space, and they may well still be there. That's the interesting thing, and it begs the question, is there some kind of surveillance network of perhaps drones or objects that are parked in geosynchronous orbit that periodically come down to the planet's surface and do a bit of monitoring and then go back up again. I mean, it's not entirely impossible. We now have definitive scientific evidence pointing to a high probability that there is something technological in geosynchronous orbit. I, for one, find that really exciting. And of course, again, to emphasize, this is still going through peer review. There may possibly be a plausible explanation that is prosaic, but we just don't know what that is at the moment.
Do you think that that could play it all into the simulation theory?
Oh, gosh. Oh, now you're going to do my head in, Megan.
I'm
I'm
sorry,
not
Ross.
sure. I mean, yeah. I mean, are we a big Truman Show where there's somebody watching us on cameras from a great distance? You know, are we basically at the bottom of a big test tube in some reptilian laboratory? I'm reading Rizwan Verk's The Simulation Hypothesis. I think that's the name of the book at the moment, and it's a new release of an earlier book that he's written, and he suggests that essentially we're just inside a big video game. So are there a bunch of reptilian, I don't know, zeta reticulines playing games with us in a computer somewhere, and we're just the hapless individuals who think that we've got real true judgment, true free will, when in fact we're just being manipulated by a massive algorithmic computer program by a couple of lizards. God knows. I really have no idea. It's a horrible thought, though. I like the fact that I think we have free will.
Yeah, I do as well. Let's hop over to another one of our favorite places, the White House. This week, JD Vance, he made some comments about the UAP community. He said he's obsessed with mysterious UFO videos. NewsNation was covering this topic. He was on the Ruthless podcast, and he said, I'll quote him, "What's actually going on? What are those videos all about? What's actually happening? I haven't gotten to the bottom of it yet, but we're only 6 months in," referring to the New Jersey drone incursion. A question from UFO influencer and a friend of our show coming in. Ross, President Trump said in June that he knows who operated the New Jersey drones but can't reveal it. Days ago, DNI Gabbard said she's aware of the official statement on the drones, but, quote, still has a lot of questions. What's with the continued lack of transparency?
Well, I can tell you, I think JD Vance's comments are a welcome intrusion into the UAP subject, even if they are, as many people are suggesting, an attempt to divert attention from the Epstein saga. I tweeted out about a week ago to POTUS, to President Trump. I suggested cheekily that right now a really good distraction from the Epstein story would be to tell the truth about UFOs. And all of a sudden, JD Vance is talking about UFOs, and so is Tulsi Gabbard, the Director of National Intelligence, the intelligence czar for the United States. I thought Ms. Gabbard's comments were actually by far the most important, because you had the person who is essentially at the top of all of the intelligence organizations in America admitting that she thinks that there may well be aliens, non-human intelligences. And she didn't explain why she thinks that. She was careful to emphasize that she's not basing her conclusions on anything that's being released that is of classified nature. She was extremely cautious, but it was, I have to say, a welcome inkling of the possibility that the White House does have plans to be more open about non-human intelligence, because frankly, a whole lot of us have been getting very despondent about the lack of engagement by the president. And maybe, to be fair, he's been kind of distracted. And maybe it is time for them to start looking. People will know that I spoke to Donald Trump Jr. on his podcast late last year, and certainly I can tell you there is no lack of interest from the president's son in the subject of UAPs. Extremely engaged, very sharp, intelligent questions, and no doubt very keen to get to the answer. And so it was heartening to hear Vice President Vance basically saying that he'd like to get to the bottom of the mystery. The other thing that I think we should really focus on here is it is still the official White House line through their official spokesperson that the FAA authorized research drones over New Jersey, and that somehow these multiple objects that were seen by thousands of people all across the East Coast and indeed right across the continental United States from November through February in peak form, but also still to this day, people are still seeing these weird so-called drone-like objects. The explanation was given that this was some kind of FAA authorized research drone, which is a load of steaming hogwash. It's absolute rubbish. I've spoken to people in the FAA and they have no idea what the White House is talking about. There was no FAA authorization of any kind for this kind of extensive operation. And moreover, the kind of objects that people were seeing and are seeing to this day are reportedly anomalous. They are operating without any visible means of propulsion. There's no propellers, there's no turbines, there's not even a heavy noise that implies that there's an engine doing any kind of work to keep these large SUV-sized objects in the air. They remain a mystery, and it's heartening to hear the Vice President of the United States state that he would like to get to the bottom of that mystery. It does perhaps imply that he hasn't been read in yet into what the President, I suspect, has been read into. And I think it's going to be very interesting to see whether Vice President Vance follows through with actually investigating this in a public way. There is a very determined effort to shut down public interest in the drone issue right now. Every time anybody bobs their heads up and says that they've seen a drone, there's the usual troll Twitter accounts that come in and try and slam them shut. I've spoken to multiple people who've recorded drone video, drone footage, put it up online, notably on YouTube, and it mysteriously disappears. I've been sent a lot of material by people which probably should be online. People tell me they've posted it online, and for some reason they can't get it up online. There is something going on. There is a concerted effort to try and keep drone vision, and I refuse to use the word drone without putting parentheses around it. I'm not sure these are drones. There are anomalous objects that are continuing to operate over the continent of the United States, that are doing things over sensitive military facilities that are defying explanation. And moreover, they are operating with impunity. Why that is not a national security concern rather than just a casual observation by the Vice President, I do not know. I don't think the White House is in control of this situation. I suspect that at least some of those objects are highly advanced Chinese technology, which is being demonstrated to be operating over the United States as a kind of a spit in the eye of the United States. You think you've got advanced technology? Look at us. I defy anyone in the Pentagon and the intelligence community to come out and explain why that's not the case. I actually think there's a bit of a cover-up going on, and it's a particularly dangerous situation because you have people in uniform, people at high level in government who are sitting on an important story that I think the public's got the right to know about.
All right, Russ, we will go to our next question from Access. This is from Shard Jewel. In your interview with Michael Herrera, you asked him a very specific question, whether Michael could identify the Spec Ops members as Mexican or South American, and if there was any discussion about where the craft might go. What was that all about?
Oh boy. Well spotted. It was a cheeky question designed to let people know that we know what's going on. I am told that there is an operation of the Legacy program in Mexico, and that it is operating under cover of an aerospace corporation. And I would not be surprised if people being deployed from that place in Padang City in Indonesia were being taken to that Mexico location. Enough said.
All right, good spot by our viewer there. Email question from Carl. Hello, a recent Reddit post is suggesting that Skywatcher has been infiltrated by a red team and NDAs have been issued to its team members to sign, invoking a muzzle on future public disclosure of their work. Matt Pines at Skywatcher has dismissed these claims. Can Ross clarify if this is true and what this may mean for the cause of Skywatcher moving forward? Keep up the great work. Regards, Carl.
Look, to be honest with you, I don't know a huge amount about what Skywatcher's up to at the moment. I haven't spoken to Alex Clocus for months. I'm told that they are doing a third video on psionics, and I'm hearing through the grapevine that that might involve people who are autistic, who have nonverbal if you like, autistic telepathic abilities. I'd love to see it. I'm not sure what's happening with Skywatcher right now. I heard no evidence of them being red teamed. When I think people use the term red team, red teaming is a term that I think most recently Jake Barber has used in his interview with me, where he talked about how part of his job was to essentially test the vulnerabilities of different military units by setting them up with different scenarios to try and find their vulnerabilities and weaknesses and teach them by red teaming them. I don't know if that's an appropriate use of that phrase with Skywatcher. Has Skywatcher been penetrated by hostile elements of the national security state? I don't know. Got no idea. If anybody does know, very interested to hear from you. And Alex Clocus, you have an open door. We are always willing to have you on Reality Check if you ever decide to embrace transparency and full accountability and do an interview and talk to us about what you guys are doing at Skywatcher.
All right, we've got another question about Jake Barber. This comes from Mrs. SpaceX. Question: do you know of any updates about the whistleblowers who have died, or a friend of Jake's that he said the FBI or someone was investigating the matter?
I can't give you an update because I don't know if there's been any developments with the law enforcement agencies, notably the FBI, that are investigating. I know that people have volunteered to give direct first-person evidence about these incidents to different congressional oversight committees, and I think there's a bit of a logjam in Congress at the moment where Congress is expecting whistleblowers just to throw themselves onto the funeral pyre of disclosure and not get the protections that they need to ensure that they can keep on doing their lives and their jobs. I, I think at the moment there is an abundance of information that is already before the Congress on those particular cases and incidents, and I think a lot of people are waiting to see what Congress is going to do with that evidence before they come forward any further with any more direct first-person evidence. Congress has to prove its mettle. It's all very well bleating that you want people to come forward. Once you've got a cupboard full, in fact, archives full of information from people who are offering data to Congress, you've got to do something with it. And frankly, if you don't do something with it, a lot of us are starting to wonder, what's the point? Is Congress interested, or is it just playing games with the public? Is it going through the pretense of doing an investigation? I think we really are at the point now where we actually have to start questioning if the committees are going to issue subpoenas. Are they going to start subpoenaing? What level of proof do they want before they decide, oh, gee, we've been told where a spaceship is in a building in a particular location. Let's go and have a look. Oh, maybe we should issue a subpoena or some kind of warrant. Why hasn't that been done? In some cases, they've had this information for 2 or 3 years, and they've certainly had the information on people who have been murdered or threatened or intimidated for quite some considerable period of time. There are a lot of people watching to see how serious Congress is about investigating the UAP issue. If you're a whistleblower, you've really got to ask the question, will I be protected? Will I be taken seriously? And will there be any action taken about what I've provided to them? I know Jake Barber, for one, and David Grush, they're both very concerned that not a lot is happening with the information, the direct first-person evidence that they've provided that would allow investigators to get to the bottom of this mystery very, very quickly if Congress used the search and seizure investigation powers that it's got. Let's have a look at the kind of powers that were used during the Church Commission when the CIA was investigated for its appalling crimes during the 1960s and 1970s, MK Ultra and others. The allegation is on the record. Congressional committees have got very detailed information, names, dates, times, places of people who have allegedly been murdered, including an alleged blue on blue incident where a JSOC operator was murdered by, allegedly, an aerospace paramilitary. Let's get to the bottom of that. But let's not keep on bleating, oh, look, we're not getting enough information. There are not enough people coming forward. You need to prove, Congress, that you're actually up to the job.
Okay, next question. This is from UFO Centrist. Megan, my question for Ross is about a guy called Gerald Anderson. His name came up in the early 1990s when he claimed to have been present at one of the Roswell crash sites at St. Augustine. Recent comments indicate he guided Tim Taylor to the crash site. Your thoughts?
Okay, I'm a Gerald Anderson skeptic. And the reason why I'm a skeptic is because there was a bit of a ding-dong between Kevin Randall, who was one of the original Roswell investigators, who essentially very early on called out Gerald Anderson. Gerald Anderson claimed, I think as a 5 or 6-year-old kid, to have been with a family member when they came across one of the crashed flying discs at the Roswell incident. And he made a whole series of dramatic claims and named certain people that they alleged that they'd run into who subsequently denied that they'd been there at all. I think the death knell for his claims, and certainly what gave Stanton Friedman, who was a big fan of his for a long time, a lack of confidence in the certainty of his claims, was he admitted falsifying, I think, a telephone account. There was some statement that he falsified, and he admitted subsequently that he had falsified the statement. And then, worst sin of all, he also falsely claimed in I think it was a Missouri newspaper, The Standard, he falsely claimed that he was a Navy SEAL, a former Navy SEAL, like an elite Special Forces operator. And stolen valor is not a good idea when you're making dramatic claims about UFOs. So yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, I don't take the claims of Gerald seriously at all. And I note that both at different times, Stanton Friedman and Kevin Randall, who've investigated his case thoroughly, have kind of expressed concern. Stanton later in his life was a bit more enthusiastic about Gerald, but frankly, there are a lot of people on the periphery of the UAP subject who come forward like this, and one of the suspicions that I have to have as a journalist investigating these people is, are they attention seekers? Are they people who are just trying to draw attention to themselves because they're kind of Walter Mitties that they like the fame and the attraction that comes from being invited to UFO conferences, and are they real? And frankly, I think the evidence of Gerald Anderson has been found wanting.
All right, next question. This is coming in from Scotty. Ross, what do you know about the suppressed UAP related medical technologies that Greer has spoken about? Can we look into it deeper or have an interview specifically about it? I feel it's much overlooked, but it's also the biggest crime against humanity in human history.
Well, look, frankly, the suppression of the whole NHI mystery is a huge crime against humanity. I have heard rumours of breakthrough medical technology research that's been discovered as part of the program. And of course, I'm aware of the claims that have been made by Stephen Greer. I just don't know if they're true, and I'd love to hear any evidence from anyone that can support those claims. I've certainly seen no data points to support a substantiable claim that there's been medical breakthroughs. That's all I can say.
All right, this is also coming from X. It's from Twinkle. What is Ross Coulthart's opinion on Three Eye Atlas? Does he believe that there's a possibility that it could be NHI?
Okay, look, I'm a bit of a Three Eye Atlas skeptic, not least because Professor Avi Loeb has himself acknowledged on his blog that the most likely explanation for Three Eye Atlas, which is allegedly an anomalous interstellar object, an object that has come into our solar system from elsewhere, Avi attaches an enormous amount of significance, and I'm not an astronomer, but he attaches an enormous amount of significance that the object reaches perihelion on the other side of the sun, i.e. at its closest point to the Earth. And he also is talking about alleged anomalous speeds of this object, which he says points to the idea that it might be some kind of technological object, some kind of covert, perhaps hostile spacecraft. Look, I don't want to get involved in a ding-dong with Professor Avi Loeb. I have a huge respect for the honourable work that he's doing through the Galileo project. He's made claims about bolides in the Pacific, which have been challenged by debunkers aggressively and I think persuasively. He went on a recovery mission for those bolides, and we haven't heard a huge amount since about what happened with those. He's also made similar claims to 3i Atlas about Oumuamua, which is the other interstellar object that came into the solar system, speculating the possibility that it's perhaps some kind of craft. The simple fact is, I don't think there's enough evidence to reach a conclusion that contradicts the most likely mainstream explanation, which is that this is just an interstellar comet. There's arguments about whether or not it's got a coma, i.e. some kind of dust trail, ice crystals being emitted from it as it melts slowly as it moves through interstellar space. I don't know. I mean, I'm not qualified to be able to take Avi on, but what I do note is when I did my own research on this, I was quite struck by the fact that Professor Loeb has himself acknowledged that the most likely explanation is that 3i Atlas is simply an interstellar comet. And look, I'd love it. I would love it if it was some kind of interstellar spacecraft that's doing surveillance of this planet. But bottom line is, what's increasingly becoming apparent is that if you accept there are NHI, why would a civilization send an interstellar spacecraft for presumably, I think it was 5,000 years from the edge of the solar system to get to where it is today? Why do that when you can move through interstellar space using an Alcubierre drive and manipulate space-time and warp space-time to jump vast distances in the universe much more quickly? Let's assume that such drives exist. Why would an interstellar civilization that's looking for other life in the universe use such primitive technology? I mean, it would almost be like us using, I don't know, electromagnetic receivers to look for electromagnetic radiation, radio signals from the universe. I mean, why would any human civilization listen for radio signals from the universe when clearly an interstellar civilization is probably no longer using radio signals? Nobody would be silly enough to do that, would they? Oh, sorry, SETI.
All right. Nice little dig there. Lucas sent us an email. He actually has 2 questions. I will give them to you one at a time. Hi, Ross. I just wanted to say I'm a big fan of the work you're doing. My question is, what is a famous UAP incident that you believe is underrated or doesn't get much attention? One that I favor is the aerial UFO incident in Zimbabwe in 1994.
Oh, gee. That's a really interesting question. I mean, I'm a huge fan of the Westall incident, which is a similar incident to the Ariel incident. And again, there were a huge number of school kids and their teachers which witnessed these elliptical objects hovering over the school playing field in a suburb called Westall in Melbourne, April 6, 1966. And what was really interesting was the follow-up, where there was quite clearly a cover-up. There were military deployed to the site, a large section of topsoil removed from the surface. You know, the first few inches of topsoil were removed, and I ended up interviewing somebody who won't go on camera, but whose father was involved in doing the secret investigation for the Department of Supply, which is a now defunct Australian Defence Department organisation that was involved in helping the secret nuclear tests at a place called Maralinga in Australia. And for some reason, the Department of Supply was the department that was called in to do the investigation into that Westall incident. So that's one of my favourites. And because we're talking about My neck of the woods, I guess I'd also like to talk about the Frederick Valentich incident, which is a young pilot in the late 1970s who disappeared over Bass Strait while he was flying from Melbourne, Moorabbin Airport, to a small airport on an island in Bass Strait. And shortly before he disappeared, if you have a listen on YouTube, you'll find the Valentich audio tapes of him having a conversation with an air traffic controller. It's quite chilling. He's describing a massive craft moving around his light plane. And shortly before he disappears forever, he makes the point that it's gigantic and it's not an aircraft.
Wow. Okay, Lucas's second question. On a lighter note, can you help me settle a bet with my friend JB? My friend wants to know if you watch UFC. Given your background in karate, Chuck Norris sponsorship is awesome.
I have a trainer, Andrew, who's a huge UFC fan, and since I moved to the country, I haven't watched it as much as I used to. I've broken every finger in both of my hands doing karate over the years, and let me tell anyone who does UFC or martial arts, it catches up with you in the end. I spend a lot of my more tender years basically regretting that I used to do things like whacking boards with my hand to try and make my punches stronger. You do stupid things when you're a young man. So yeah, I am a kind of a UFC fan, but as I get older, I get more and more respectful of the fact that the human body is vulnerable. And one of the things I learned very early on in martial arts was that you should not and cannot ever get into a fight where punches are exchanged. It's always an admission of defeat in martial arts that you actually have to use the skills that you've been taught. And I just realized how vulnerable the human body is. And so these days I watch UFC like this. I can't watch the violence. It's too scary.
Tough to watch sometimes. All right, one more for you. This is from UAP Tracker. I picked this just for you, Ross. Do you ever get a chance to sleep?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I was asking myself that question when NewsNation had me up at 4 o'clock in the morning the other morning to do another live record. Look, I do, and I love my sleep. It has been an astonishingly busy year since the Jake Barber story broke in January. I am overwhelmed with people contacting me, demanding my time, wanting to meet with me, which is one of the reasons why I'm on the road here in Australia. I'm checking out certain witnesses that have come forward to me, having detailed one-on-one conversations with them. I'm traveling to try and make contact with people, checking out locations for certain projects that I'm working on. And my lovely wife has actually come on the road with me, which is why I'm speaking slightly quietly, because she's asleep in a hotel room right next door. So I'm hoping I haven't woken her up, otherwise I'm in the bad books for the rest of the day.
All right, well, Ross, we will let you go on that note. You're excused.
Thanks very much, guys, and we'll see you next week, Megan. If you want to send me a question, we'll do our level best to try and answer it. The email is realitycheck@newsnationnow.com.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.